I just got out of seeing Joker 2, Folie A Deux, which is still one of the worst names for a movie in such a long time. And this has been one of the most talked about movies of not only the entire year, but probably of the entire decade so far. Joker was a very controversial movie when it came out. There are a lot of people online that will give you one of two reviews, that it's either a masterpiece or one of the worst movies of the past 10 years. For me, I thought Joker was a great movie. And I guess that might be a hot take nowadays, but I really think there are so many great scenes in there, and Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely incredible in the role. I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater back in 2019, so maybe my opinion would change if I gave it a rewatch before I saw this. But still to this day, I remember the feeling I left from that cinema when I saw the movie. And I do think films like Joker are important because yes, it's an obvious ripoff of Scorsese films like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, but I would rather watch that any day of the week over half of the Marvel stuff out there. I like when a filmmaker takes a risk and does something different with the genre. I mean, The Dark Knight was a superhero movie, and if I never saw that when I was 12 years old, I probably wouldn't be making YouTube videos about movies. Because if somebody saw Joker and said, man, that was a great movie, what was so different about that? Why did it feel like a unique experience? That could inspire them to go check out some Martin Scorsese movies or any other films in general. So I think any movie that gets people interested in the art of filmmaking is a win for Hollywood. And that film was a huge success. It was the first R-rated film to ever make $1 billion at the box office, which is absolutely crazy. And I remember still that Joaquin and Todd Phillips kept saying there will never be a Joker 2. This does not fit in any sort of DC cinematic universe. This was a standalone story, and we're never making another one. But when you make $1 billion, you want to get more money. So they decided to make Joker Folie A Deux, which I didn't really care about until they announced Lady Gaga was going to be Harley Quinn and this was going to be a musical. And they kind of hyped it up like we would never make a Joker 2 unless we had a great idea. So that means the movie I had in my head had zero chance of actually being made. Because when you take that great of a risk on a movie like this, that is something to admire, and it could horribly backfire. I mean, I don't know how many people realized this was a musical going into this weekend, but you can tell from the general response to this movie that a lot of people don't fuck with the idea, because Joker 2 is getting shit on right now. A lot of people are calling this one of the worst movies of the entire year. A lot of comic book fans are pretty pissed about what it does with the characters, and I'm sitting over here kind of still debating how good the movie is, because the entire time I was watching it, I kept saying, this is all right. Like, it's, I think, objectively and very okay movie, but they do so many interesting things with the characters and the story, and I was never bored the entire time. I was always engaged, wondering what was going to happen next. And I feel like I rarely get a movie like this where it feels so pointless. Like, you knew Joker 2 was always going to be a pointless movie, but if they were going to make it, you at least hope that it's going to be interesting. But when they officially announce a Joker 2, that makes you think, okay, they got to have a pretty good idea. And to be sitting there in the theater and watching the most pointless story possibly of the entire year is crazy. But what's even crazier is that I kind of enjoy a good amount of this movie. And the things I like the most, I'm gonna have to dive into spoilers eventually in this video. I'm gonna start off with a lot of my negatives that don't revolve around spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled the movie, you're okay for the first half of the video, but most of my negatives will be talked about in that first half. So if you only watch the non-spoiler part, just know I do recommend you go see this movie and make an opinion for yourself, because a lot of people are split on this movie, and who knows, maybe you'll like it even more than me. But the thing that's a positive with this movie is the thing that was a big positive with the first movie from the get-go, and that's Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely incredible as the Joker. I'm still a Heath Ledger guy. I always have, I always will be, but Joaquin does such a different take on the character that's really terrifying. And there were parts in this movie where I was afraid it would lose some of that with the musical element of the movie, but I still think that terrifying, freaky nature from the first Joker film is just as present in this performance, if not a little bit more. And I know he's got a lot of Hollywood beef right now, but I do think he would be worthy to get another Oscar nomination. I don't know if they'll give it to him again or not, but he is really damn good in this movie. And I thought we were going to get the same thing with Lady Gaga here, because when they announced it was going to be a musical and they announced Lady Gaga was going to be Harley Quinn, I said, okay, she is really trying even harder. I didn't think it was possible for Lady Gaga to try harder to get her Oscar, but she did it. She showed up, and I think she does a good job with the performance. I think the character has some interesting things about about her, which we'll get into in the spoiler section. But at the end of the day, whatever we got in the movie, she just feels very underused. Like, I was kind of surprised how little she has to do in the movie. Like, she has a few scenes. I'm not saying she's barely in the movie, but she's kind of always in the background. She's not ever doing that much. When she is on screen, she is good. But even in the musical numbers, it never felt like there was a scene where she went off, which I felt very weird about. Because if you get someone like Lady Gaga, you think A Star Is Born, like that moment where she goes on the stage for the first time and absolutely kills it. I thought Joker 2 would have a moment like that for her, but it really doesn't at all. Because coming into the Oscar season, I thought automatically, okay, this might finally be the performance that gets Gaga her Oscar. And I don't even think I would nominate her based off this. She doesn't have that much to do in the movie. And clearly she was the front runner for the role with the musical choice, which I guess we could just get into that aspect of the movie. If you didn't know this was a musical going in, you'll be very surprised when you see a lot of musical numbers. I didn't hate the idea from the get-go. Immediately, I thought, okay, if they're doing something so different from the first movie and the musical numbers work, this could be a genius idea for a Joker 2. And the way it's incorporated into the story, I don't hate. Like, I do think it makes sense the way they use it to kind of go into his fantasy kind of world. The problem, though, is they don't flow well into the story at all. And when they actually appear, they're not that great. Like, I just went to the Toronto International Film Festival. I saw a lot of musicals there, and none of them had Lady Gaga. But I think of a movie like Emilia Perez, which you'll all get a chance to watch in a couple months, and just thinking of 2 or 3 sequences in that movie alone, those completely blow away anything in Joker 2. I just don't think it delivers on the whole musical aspect. I don't think the songs are well picked or choreographed or sang even. I don't think they fit well into the story at all. It just felt like such a tacked on thing to the story that I still don't hate the idea that they went for, but I do hate how they incorporated it. And that is like 90% of the job. And honestly, the entire movie just feels like it was multiple drafts away from being the great movie it deserved to be. Like, there are a lot of things I really like, which we're going to get to in a second in the spoiler section, but I do think a lot of this movie just doesn't feel finished. Not even that it doesn't feel finished, it just feels so stretched out. It's like they had a 20-minute idea that they stretched out into 2 hours, and instead of coming up with a story that fit a 2-hour runtime, they kind of just kept stretching it out and out with whether it be a musical number or just extending a scene longer. It really does feel like a DLC for a video game at a lot of points, where it's just you pay $20 more and you get a little bit of extra content. And a lot of this movie feels like a sequel that would have come out 30 years after the original. Like with Beetlejuice recently, they make a lot of callbacks to the original movie, and it's like, hey, you remember this thing from 30 years ago? They do that quite a few times in this movie, but Joker came out 5 years ago. We're not that nostalgic for it yet. And I already hate when legacy sequels do that. So when you're gonna do that to a movie that came out in 2019, it's like, what the hell are you doing? We don't need to see the staircase again. And every negative I just said is definitely a big aspect as to why the movie doesn't work. Like, I have seen a lot of people hate the movie because of those things that I just said. And I think that's a completely fair point to make. Like, if you hate this movie, especially because of those things, I completely understand where you're coming from. Like, I don't expect a lot of people to enjoy this movie, but they do some stuff towards the end that I have to talk about. Because at first I wasn't sure if I liked what they were going for, but the more I sit on it, the more I think about this movie, I love a lot of what they do with the characters. But to talk about that, we're going into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to see it, you don't want to listen to this part of the video. Because a lot of people keep saying this movie is pointless. I kind of agree to a certain extent, but they do some things you probably don't want to be spoiled. So if you are still here, I'm assuming you've seen the movie, and let's talk about it. So there's been a lot of talk in the film community over the past 10-ish years about subverting expectations and why that is usually a bad thing. And the movie that made that popular in the first place was Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which is a movie I admit I do not like at all. I thought it was a very stupid way to handle the characters and what was set up in the previous movie. And I can see why somebody would assume that Joker 2 does something very similar to The Last Jedi, but I think there's a very distinct difference between how The Last Jedi subverts your expectations, and how Joker 2 subverts your expectations. The problem I had with The Last Jedi was not necessarily the choices it wanted to go for, but rather how it followed up The Force Awakens when you're stuck in this box of what is a trilogy. When the previous movie sets up so many things that you're waiting to get answers for, and the answers end up being just a middle finger to the audience. A lot of people on Letterboxd really like that. I was not one of those people. I thought it was such a waste of time. It pissed me off, and I could understand why somebody would feel the same way about this movie, but I think why Joker 2 subverting expectations actually works, and I think might actually age better than we all think it will, is because Joker was a complete story. They said multiple times they were never going to make a sequel to Joker. You followed this guy that had some serious mental illness issues. He started this revolution. He killed Robert De Niro on TV, and that was the movie. You had a complete package of a psychopath. And look, I've never talked to Todd Phillips. I don't know what was going through his mind when he made Joker 1 or Joker 2, but I think it's pretty obvious the way he treats Arthur in Joker 2 that when he made the first movie, it had a different impact on culture than he anticipated. I think pretty much everybody understood the point of Joker. I would think 95% of the people agreed the guy was a psychopath by the end of the movie. But you gotta remember from his perspective, like when you make a character like this, a lot of shit could happen. Like you have some people that could be inspired by a character like this to do some real evil shit. The most popular Halloween costume of the year becomes your iconic psychopath. You have diehard comic fans that are probably sending you death threats about how you treated the character. And with Joker 2, I really feel like he decided to pull a Dune Messiah, which I still haven't read, so I can't really fully explain my point. But from what I understand, Frank Herbert wrote Dune and made Paul Atreides the bad guy in his mind, and then everybody read the book and was like, no, Paul Atreides is the hero. We love Paul. So then he wrote Dune Messiah to be like, no, Paul was not the good guy the entire time, and then everyone hated Dune Messiah. And I don't think everyone thought Arthur was the good guy in Joker at all. But I think the whole point of Joker 2 is if Arthur isn't the Joker, nobody would care about him. If you made this movie and it wasn't called Joker, it would never exist. There's a scene in the movie where he's trying to make a knock-knock joke and the punchline is Arthur who? And it's not that nuanced. It's a very obvious thing, but I think that entire theme carries through the entire movie in a really nice way. When he got stabbed at the end, I kind of didn't like it at first. It felt kind of cheap, and then when you see the guy carving his face in the back, you're like, is that the Heath Ledger Joker? Like that he can't possibly be doing that. But then you realize it can't be the Heath Ledger Joker because Harvey Dent is in this movie, and even if he's way younger, the timelines just wouldn't add up. And I don't think he's even trying to necessarily go for that. I think there's two things in that ending that are very effective. The first being, if you make yourself a character that stands for a very specific violent force, there's almost no going back from that. Like even if you say you're done with the thing, you have inspired a group of hateful people and it will just keep spreading. And I thought that aspect was handled well, but I don't think it's handled as well as the second thing that makes the ending so effective. And you could already see it with everyone complaining on the internet. Everyone is pissed off at the ending because it's like, what was the point if he wasn't the Joker? And that's the question Todd Phillips is trying to answer to you the entire movie. The whole point is that if this guy wasn't the Joker the whole time and he was just a guy named Arthur, all of these people wouldn't care about him. I watched 3 videos back to back all complaining who fucking cares if this wasn't the Joker, and I find that very interesting to incorporate into your ending. I also found the way they handled Harley Quinn in this very interesting. I thought they were going to go down the very obvious path that she's his psychiatrist or something like that, and he would eventually turn her. I think we all expected the movie to go that way, but the way they turned her into like this true crime super fan and that she was just fucking crazy and just wanted to get famous off of this one guy, I thought was a very interesting take on the character. Sure, she's underused, and then at the end of the movie when Joaquin is like, oh, we're having a baby, I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, yeah, it's messy along the way, but I do find it very interesting. And I love the whole aspect of her just being a rich kid that's trying to make a difference or get famous. I just find it so funny that Joker 2 has like the biggest Venn diagram where one side is privileged rich white kids that act poor and the other side is diehard comic book fans, and then in the middle is just pissed off people. I just feel like there's not many movies that could pull that off, and I appreciate that Todd Phillips did. And there were some other cool stylistic things here too. Like I like the little cartoon intro that they had going. I like the interview he does before his trial trial. I liked all the courtroom stuff, honestly. But like I said, the musical numbers and just the messiness of it does bring it a huge notch down from the first movie. I don't see a lot of people liking this one more than the first movie. And even though I did enjoy this one, it's not nearly as iconic as the first movie. It's getting some of the worst reviews of the year. I don't think it's nearly that bad. Like, the fact that some people are putting this and Madam Web in the same conversation is fucking criminal. But at the same time, I could see this being the sequel 10 years from now when somebody says, oh man, you want to watch Joker 1 and 2? And then the other person responds, you know what? How about we just watch the first one? Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you as always. This is all my social media right here, but Letterboxd is the most important to me. Also, shout out Reed to helping me out with editing this video. I've been moving the past 2 weeks at this point, and it's been an absolute nightmare. I'm almost finished, but this guy is really helping me out in my time of need. So shout out Reed. If you liked how he edited the video, this is all of his stuff right here, so you can hit him up. And if you really like the video, be sure to like the video because it helps out the algorithm a lot. It helps me out a lot more than you think, and it takes 2 seconds. If you don't want to like it, if you want to dislike it, that's okay too. That also helps the algorithm, so I appreciate either one. If you really liked what I had to say, be sure to subscribe because we have a ton of videos on this channel. We got a lot more coming. It's not just the superhero stuff. I also just ranted about Megalopolis. We talk about every kind of movie we possibly can here. I also have my huge TIFF recap still coming, which covers a lot of the Oscar movies coming up, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. But be sure to comment down below. Are you one of the people that hated Joker 2? Are you one of the people that really likes Joker 2? Do you like it more or less than the first one? I haven't heard anybody that liked it more than the first one, but if you are that person, I'd love to hear from you. And if you like this video and you want to see more, YouTube thinks you're really gonna like this video right here. So I really hope you enjoy that, and I hope I keep entertaining you. So this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.